Wildcard active, Haaland gone, Man United players in, season-defining week. Need I say any more? If you look forward to today's Game Week 10 team selection video, make sure to drop a like, smash the subscribe button, and enough waffling. Let's get into today's video. So to give you an idea on why I activated the wildcard going into Game Week 10, originally the plan was not to wildcard at all. However, the midweek games happened, we saw Eze go off with a potential hamstring injury, and in that moment I had to make a decision on what to do with this team, because if Eze was ruled out, as you can see on my bench, it's pretty damn woeful. Barco ain't in the country, Muniz is only playing 5 minutes a game, Collins then comes in, and then I've got double Brentford, I got triple Fulham if I make the transfer that I was intending, and it would have been a bit of a car crash week. And it's not just this game week, it's then the following game week. I'd have double Villa away against Liverpool, not ideal at all, and the team just looks a complete mess in my eyes. Yes, there is some good value picks, Trent, Robinson, Lewis, Mbeumo, Palmer. Watkins always is a good option, but with those fixtures coming up, I do think there is problems afoot with my team, and the longer that I leave my team, and you probably notice my team value is quite possibly the worst in the world, I couldn't afford to allow myself 2 more game weeks where I'm just trying to get through them to then activate the wildcard in game week 12, because when I looked at the fixtures, I looked at a game week 12 wildcard, it basically is similar to that of a game week 10 wildcard, but it might be $1 million more expensive come game week 12. And I just don't have that luxury or budget to allow myself. So that is why I activated the wildcard. Yes, there are still some good players available, but when you take the Eze injury into account, I think then we are struggling. So let's get into some Game Week 10 wildcard discussions. So first up, whenever I activate my wildcard, I have to get some players in place that I really do think are locked in. Then we can start to fill the blanks around it. But as you can see, a Game Week 10 wildcard is tough. I'm going to be honest with you. It isn't the most ideal time to activate it because we're in between fixtures. We know we want certain teams later on, but of course we need to attack the fixtures that are in front of us. So there are a few players that I do think are locked in. Fabianski at 4 million, no brainer. I expect him to start again in game week 11, but I'm not one of those people that is now sat here thinking that Fabianski plays the rest of the season. I don't think that will be the case. I just think he has come in to steady the ship at West Ham. In terms of the defenders, Ain't Nori on a wildcard, I think is just a no-brainer with those long-term great fixtures, and importantly, yes, he is a yellow card away from a suspension, but because of wildcarding, it will be my own fault if I don't have 15 players that play each and every week for their respective teams. So if that suspension does happen, I will have the bench to allow myself to just substitute someone in. And Vandenberg is just coming in as this 4 million defender. Yes, I would love to have the luxury of having the team value to upgrade that to a 4.5 million, but I just don't have the budget. It was my own fault for the opening 9 game weeks not being aggressive with the players that I selected. So I have to have a 4 million defender, and Vandenberg I actually think is offering great value. Now, the rest of the defence honestly is up for grabs. We will touch on that in a minute. In terms of the midfielders, Mo Salah, Palmer and Mbeumo, I just think there's no world you're not having any of these in your wildcard team. You probably already have Palmer and Mbeumo, and this week feels like the week to target Mo Salah. And another reason why I wasn't necessarily all for the wildcard game week 12, it originally was the plan. But I think the next 3 is a time to be really aggressive with Liverpool players like Mo Salah. And if you wildcard in game week 12, they have Southampton away. I feel like you're going to be inclined to go there, but then they got Man City the following game. So wildcarding in game week 10 allows me to bring in Mo Salah unapologetically and allows me to restructure my team very, very easy. The other 2 spots up for grabs, and we will touch on a little bit of a team structure in a minute, but I am looking at having another spot in this team which is allocated to a premium midfielder. Now, in terms of the front 3, again, no Erling Haaland. I'm just going to put it out there. There is no world, again, that I'm going to be wildcarding in game week 10 and having Erling Haaland in it. Otherwise, it completely negates why I'm activating the wildcard. So I happily am making that decision, and what will be in the next 5 game weeks, because that is how long I'm planning on going without Erling Haaland. It's not for 30 game weeks. People panic about that. It's for the next 5, and then he most likely will come in for those great fixtures afterwards. But Cunha is the only one that I really look at. Now, when I've done a bit of analysis at the start of this week, his numbers aren't actually fantastic. I think there are better options out there in terms of underlying numbers, but we need to remember that he delivered those numbers in a really tricky run of games. I expect him to improve in terms of expected goals, and he's such a good, well-rounded asset that if he picks up an attack in return, he's in for the bonus points. His baseline bonus is ridiculous, and I just think he is a pick that a lot of managers are getting to regardless, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to wildcard this week and not have him in. So he is in, but outside of that, it is up for grabs. So let's take a look at my Game Week 10 wildcard team selection, and then I'll show you some variations on the decisions that I still have to make. So here's my Game Week 10 wildcard team selection, and the first thing that I need to note is that this team does have 1 million in the bank, which is really contradictory because, of course, I said to you that I don't have much team value, but I want to have a little bit of money in the bank to be flexible in future game weeks. So right now, the goalkeeper choice is going to be Sells. Now, going to be honest, there are tons of goalkeeper options in my mind. I could upgrade that to someone like a Raya if I wanted to and just have Arsenal in for the long term. But of course, that will then allocate all of the money in the bank. I could go for someone like a Verbruggen, who is terrible for the next couple of weeks, but then long term, actually some solid fixtures. But I want to be aggressive in the opening weeks. I think Nottingham Forest are one of the better defences in the league, so I don't think I need to overthink it right now. Sells in for the home game against West Ham with no Kudus, I do think is a good fixture. Game week 11 is good and game week 13 is good. And as long as Fabianski keeps his place in the team, he can easily come in as a change-up for Sells in certain weeks where I need that rotation. They don't really rotate well, but I think Sells' fixtures are good enough to justify him being my goalkeeper. But I will say I am not 100% certain on the goalkeeper spot yet. This one probably is still 70% on Sells, 30% that it could go anyone else. Now, in terms of the defenders, I have got Trent in this team. Now, if I wanted to change it up, and I will show you a team without him in a minute, then of course I have plenty of other options available. But I think for the next 2 home games for Liverpool followed by Southampton away, I just think if I don't go without Trent, it's one of those picks where I could look back in a couple of weeks, he's racked up 2 clean sheets out of the next 3, maybe an assist, he's going to rack up the bonus points, and I think then it is impossible for me to get to him. And I just think with me having him early, a little bit of value accumulated, it just makes sense to keep him in the team. So Trent is in, but if I need to free up some funds, he probably is the first player that I'm taking those funds away from. The other defenders are up for grabs. I've spoke about Aït-Nouri and I spoke about Van der Berg being in this team. But then we got these two. Now, Anderson right now is in, but it's worth noting, he is not a lock. I need a cheap defender. It could be Mykolenko, it could be Anderson, being at 4.3 million. But with those fixtures for Fulham, I do think there is some value to be had there. I don't mind Fulham at home defensively. So Anderson is in right now, but that one can change. But I need a cheap defender. And finally, Rico Lewis. Now, I picked him up really cheap. His price has actually skyrocketed in that meantime. I think it probably will continue to rise as Kyle Walker is absent. Now, do I back Man City for clean sheets in the next 2? Probably not. But with the injuries that Man City have, maybe Pep has no choice but to actually just be a bit more of a solid team in the coming weeks. Be all about possession, as he always does, but retaining that ball, trying to just win by goals to 0, and then coming away with the points. And Rico Lewis has to play in these coming games with the injuries that they have to the likes of Akanji and Kyle Walker, as mentioned. Now, there are a few players I am considering, someone like a Diego Dallo upgrade, but then I am really taking a punt on that Man United defence being good under Van Nistelrooy before Amorim comes in charge. But I do like the idea of Dallo. That is the one that I'm currently debating between. But otherwise, I think the defence looks okay. Now, moving into the midfielders, we've spoken about Mbeumo, Palmer and Salah just being absolutely locked into this team. But the other 2 spots are up for debate. So the first spot that I want to talk about is going to be Son. Now, this one right now I'm calling the premium spot in this draft because I think right now it is a toss-up between Son and Bukayo Saka. Now, a reminder, Son has Aston Villa at home, followed by Ipswich at home. Saka plays Newcastle away, followed by Chelsea away. Now, I think the Newcastle game is tough. I think the Chelsea game is great for Saka. I really do think that Chelsea defensively are all over the place still. Newcastle in that Premier League game easily could have scored 2 goals. So I'm actually still quite bullish on Bukayo Saka as a pick. But Son in these next 2, if he does feature and plays, let's say, 70 in the Villa game, 70 in the Ipswich game, I actually do prefer to that of Bukayo Saka, knowing that I am actually then putting a transfer in place for game week 12 or game week 13, which isn't ideal, but I do think the upside is still there for Son. I fully expect him to come back into this Spurs team as long as he hasn't had a setback with his recent injury. But of course, the big risk that we are taking is that injury that he currently has, could it crop up again and maybe they rest him in the Ipswich game? Because honestly, that is the only reason why Son is in this team, is to target the Ipswich game and, to be honest with you, to put the captaincy on him as well. But if I have any sort of cold feet, Son goes straight to Bukayo Saka and the team basically remains the same. So that is the debate to be had. The other spot is the one where I want to be a bit excited. Now, Garnacho is in. 6.2 million that I picked him up at. He's already gone up to 6.3 million. And I think the Chelsea game is great. I've spoken about this. Chelsea do not keep a clean sheet against Man United at Old Trafford. And even though I think Chelsea can still win this game, I think Man United score goals. And I think Garnacho is going to be a key player in whatever direction Man United go in the next couple of months. Yes, it is taking a punt on Man United. Yes, you might be thinking I'm delusional, but with Leicester at home in game week 11, it feels like another great fixture to have some assets from this Man United team. And I don't really want to be paying the premiums of Bruno Fernandes and Rashford right now. So that's why I've allocated it to Garnacho. If I had to change the structure, I could easily come down to someone like a Morgan Rogers, who has terrible fixtures in the coming few weeks, but then has some good fixtures. The problem with Morgan Rogers, of course, is Champions League, Christmas rotation. Could we see that happen to him? And I think it could happen. So midfielders like this for now, very aggressive with my two picks, but I think I need to be on a game week 10 wildcard. Now, finally, coming into the forwards, and this is the one that I am losing so much sleep over, because the midfield right now, if I look at that, if that doesn't deliver in the next 2 weeks, then I can just put my hands up and say I felt like I got unlucky. Yes, the swing between Son and Saka could be huge, but I'm pretty happy with that midfield. The forwards, I'm struggling. Now, Cunha is the one that I said I'm locked if a wildcard, and he just has to be in that team. But the two that right now that I've got are budget forwards in Raul Jimenez and Johan Visser, who is currently on the bench. Now, I have a problem with the forwards because, of course, we don't have any mid-price forward here. We're not going to go with Erling Haaland. I'm not going to go with Watkins for those coming weeks. So it comes down to, do I want to actually allocate a mid-price forward in there? Now, the selections that I can go for is Kai Havertz. Well, I don't want Kai Havertz for the next coming game, so he isn't going to be in. And loads of people are talking about having a game week 12 Kai Havertz pick, but then you're not going to have double Arsenal defence and Saka. So I think that's just a lot of talk by people than actual action. So then when we look at the forwards that are available to us, we got Darwin Núñez at Liverpool. Well, that's a risk in itself. After the international break, Jota will be back. Núñez minutes are all over the place once again. Then we got Nicholas Jackson. That is probably the most logical pick. But with the next two games that they have, don't think it is actually a great pick. Then we got someone like a Dominic Solanke. Very difficult to trust in with the underlying numbers that we've seen in the last few weeks. And finally, the only other pick that we could really go to is someone like a Haaland. But do we really want to go for someone like a Haaland right now when we got Garnacho at 6.2 million? I think the answer is going to be no. So while a lot of people are actually very much against having a cheap forward line, I do actually think there is some real value in it. And then, come game week 13, we can look to restructure the team if we really feel like a mid-price forward has put his hand up as the choice. So Raul's Hin, I think he's a really good rotational pick, really involved in everything Fulham are doing, and hopefully the penalty taker off the back of Andreas's miss. And I've gone for Visser right now. So I've got 1 million in the bank. I can easily upgrade Visser to Chris Wood, which probably is the more sensible pick. But I do think Visser, obviously we know Ivan Toney, his minutes are going to be absolutely locked in. And I just back Brentford to score more goals than that of Nottingham Forest. But obviously if Forest score, we know Chris Wood is pretty much at the heart of everything that they do. So a little bit of debate to be had there. But right now, that is how the forwards are looking. I know I'm taking a risk with it, but I'm pretty content with those forwards at the price points. Gives me 1 million in the bank. Captaincy, of course, would be on Mo Salah. No debate with this team. Vice captaincy on Cole Palmer because he could just do it in any fixture. So that's how the wildcard team is looking. What I want to show you now is how it would look in the coming weeks as some potential transfers. So take a look at how my team would look in the upcoming weeks, because I know you're probably watching this thinking there's no Bukayo Saka, there's no Arsenal defence, etc., etc. I'm just going to try and go through mentally how I would go with this team to maybe try and help myself in this situation. So coming into game week 10, of course, the team looks like this, but it's worth noting, I do think Lewis could easily become someone like a Diego Dallo at the time of recording. So coming into game week 11, again, the team would look like this. Sells against Newcastle at home, I actually think absolutely fine. I think the defence picks itself. Then we would have a position where I think Vissa would have to come in for Raul Jimenez. And I think the midfield looks fantastic this week. If we can get Son in a position where he's starting, I think I've got the best midfielder. I think I've got the best differential in Garnacho. And then I basically have got the template in Salah, Palmer and Mbeumo. So the midfield look like this. And honestly, I would have to roll my transfer regardless of what happens. The only way I'd make a transfer in game week 11 is if something like Mo Salah got injured for the long term. That wouldn't be a player that I could roll. So that is the only situation where I think I would force myself to make a transfer. So coming into game week 12, this is where it is an interesting game week. So both goalkeepers have terrible fixtures, so I would just have to play Sells, I think, and hope for the best. Maybe he picks up a penalty save or something. In terms of the defence, not ideal, because if I play Anderson, he will come up against Cunha, but he could easily come in for Aït-Nouri if I rather have the home fixture for Anderson. Trent away against Southampton is great. Then we have the issue of Son. Now, we're in a position right now where Son is away against Man City. Historically, has done very, very well in that game, but probably isn't the optimal player to have in this game week. So one of the free transfers that I can make is doing Son for Bukayo Saka very easily, and that would leave me 0.9 million in the bank, as you can see. Now, one argument would be I should just have Saka for the start of my wildcard, so I don't have to book in this transfer. But the other thing that I would argue is I think there is enough upside for Son in those coming game weeks. So Son to Saka would come in for game week 12 as a long-term hold, and the rest of the team would look something like this. As we've spoken about, I could easily bring in Raul Jimenez if I wanted to for someone like a Vissa. When we take a look at the fixtures for game week 12, the only team that I really don't have any investment in is going to be Aston Villa at home against Crystal Palace. Maybe an Ollie Watkins would be the wise pick, but do I want to have him for game weeks 10 and 11? I think the answer is going to be no. Obviously, that is where the advantage of wildcarders in game week 12 comes in. So I do think they would go for Watkins, and that could be a fantastic game. But then Chelsea away in game week 13, we need to look at it as a 2-3 game week rolling average rather than just one game week in isolation. So coming into game week 13, again, I don't want to plan this team too far in advance because so much can happen. But of course, we have the big Liverpool versus City game. So the problem with this week, I would have to play Van den Berg in this game. The rest of the team probably picks itself. I think I would keep Mo Salah for a home game against Man City. I think there would be opportunities there. Doesn't feel like a good game week to try and navigate Haaland into this team. And again, when we take a look at the actual fixtures for game week 13, I have Arsenal assets. Do I think having an Arsenal defender is essential away against West Ham? I think the answer is probably no. But if I needed to, I could easily take the money out to somebody like a Trent and come down to a Gabriel if it does look like Arsenal are just essential. So once again, I do think I could roll a transfer in at game week 13. Game week 14 really would be the start where I would need to try and bring Erling Haaland into this team. And one way that I could do it is selling someone like a Mo Salah, for example, and coming down to a cheap option, maybe like a Morgan Rogers, if we've seen his price come down. That would give me 8.2 million in the bank, where I would need to free up some funds. So Vissa out to Erling Haaland. And then I'd have one final change to make with 1.3 million that I would need to allocate in the team. And of course, that probably is going to come at the expense of someone like a Trent. So taking the money out of Trent and coming down to someone at 5.7 million, I could get lucky and maybe be able to pick up someone like a Calaflori, whose price might fall down and might actually be a regular starter. But again, away at home against Man United, is that a great fixture to own him? Probably not. So you can see here, I do think it is very easy for me to actually get to Erling Haaland come game week 14. But then there's still an argument that, is he actually the entry point in game week 14? Maybe game week 18, but would I actually be brave enough to go without him over that period? Most likely not. So That is how the team would be looking for those coming game weeks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, for those people asking me a slight variation in this wildcard team, if I wanted to bring in a premium forward, I say premium, at that mid-price range, then it would look something like this. So what I would have to do is slightly change the team up. I think Solanke is the one that I would go for on a wildcard. I know it's controversial. Everybody's selling him. Everybody's saying he's terrible, but he's playing well. He's just not getting the shots away. But I think Villa and Ipswich will give him the opportunities. So I think Solanke is actually quite a nice pickup on this wildcard. I know that will be very, very divisive. So coming in for Dominic Solanke for this 7.7 million price range, some would argue just get Nicholas Jackson in, but I do think the team looks good like this. If I was to do so, then that would mean I would just bring in Saka. There's no sense having Son in that midfield. So I'd bring in Saka, and in order to fund these moves, I would then have to downgrade someone like a Garnacho to a Morgan Rogers, who I know is terrible for the next few weeks, would just sit on the bench, but long term still remains a great pickup. This team would have 0.1 million in the bank, but it would allow me a bit more flexibility with being able to pivot to other forwards in the game at that mid-price point. But again, as I've spoken about, I don't actually think I love the mid-price forwards at times. I think there are a couple, but is Jackson now essential in the game? I don't think he really is. So that's how the team could look if I wanted to shift it up a little bit. So let me know in the comment section, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer this team, maybe a bit more better balanced, or the other one where it's really aggressive on those midfield premiums? Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 10 wildcard team selection video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I am stressed this week. No Haaland is always going to be the case, but I do like the excitement going into Game Week 10. So as always, if you have any questions, please pop them in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in tomorrow's deadline live stream. Take care. Cheers.